In this news roundup of the week for the 30th of December 2022. As COVID rages across China, some countries bring in restrictions on travellers, blaming the fear of new variants. Russian oligarchs continue to die by sudden falling out of hotel windows syndrome. A controversial leading light of the manosphere picks a fight with Greta Thunberg and ends up sad. And in this week's short thought, one more thing about those New Year's resolutions. My name is Mallen Baker. This is the Mallen Baker Show. Evidence of just how far-reaching China's COVID epidemic is was presented as the first travellers took advantage of the ending of China's ban on foreign travel. Italy reported that the first two flights to Milan on Boxing Day had 38% and 52% of the travellers testing positive for COVID. Presumably the remaining passengers, having sat within such a large group of infected people, will soon be following them. In spite of the fact that COVID is more or less endemic now in most countries, the scale of the contamination has led to the US, India and Japan bringing in new restrictions. Italy has brought in mandatory testing for visitors from China and called on the EU to do likewise. Now, authorities are particularly nervous that the scale of the epidemic raging across China might lead to the rise of new variants, which could then begin yet another fresh wave across the rest of the world. Britain has said that in the absence of any evidence of new variants, it does not have plans to bring in restrictions. There's plenty of Omicron around. A few more cases flying in from China isn't going to make a huge amount of difference. Now, that's the sort of a statement that back in the Boris Johnson days would have swiftly been followed by a U-turn. However, Britain now has a grown-up and stable government again, and that means... What? Oh, okay. Yeah, a couple of hours after that statement, the Defence Secretary said that tightened restrictions were now under review. So who knows what the position will be by the time you watch this. Everything changes, and yet everything stays the same. In China, meanwhile, everything must be going incredibly well, because according to the authorities, just scant handfuls of people are dying. This despite the fact that according to leaked figures from government sources, around 250 million people, a quarter of a billion, and nearly a fifth of the population have been infected with COVID during December. Despite the fact that medical practitioners have been anonymously speaking to Western journalists reporting chaos, not enough beds, a doctor-patient ratio that's gone from 1 to 4 to 1 to 10 or worse, and a high mortality rate with reportedly around 50% of those admitted to ER dying. Now, obviously those doctors must be mistaken, since the alternative would be to conclude that the Chinese Communist Party is a bunch of lying liars who lie a lot. And surely it can't be that. But then maybe they're just not paying attention. The leadership instead seems to be very much focused on Taiwan right now, with its largest incursion of military craft into Taiwan's air defence zone carried out this week. More than 70 aircraft, including fighter jets and drones, were detected in one 24-hour period, and to those you can add 7 Chinese naval vessels that were also detected close at hand. An official spokesman for the Chinese military said that the operation was a response to the US defence spending bill that recently approved more security support for Taiwan. Taiwan also extended compulsory military service for its people to a year in response to the perceived growing threat level, a move which also irritated the Chinese. On the day of shooting this video, Chinese President Xi Jinping held a video conference call with Russian President Vladimir Putin. In the publicly broadcast preamble, Putin told Xi that Moscow wanted to ramp up military cooperation with Beijing, invited him to make a state visit to Russia in the spring of 2023. Xi, for his part, voiced readiness to increase political cooperation with Russia in a difficult international environment and serve as Moscow's global partner. Those are really the expected broad expressions of friendship and support for the punters. The real question is just how pointed or otherwise the unreported substantive discussions were. Putin had mentioned in public before that the Xi Jinping and Chinese leadership had expressed concerns about the conduct of the Ukraine war, Since that point, Russia has notably ramped down the muttered implied threats about the use of nuclear weapons. Whether that takes it off the table now as a concern is an open question. One thing they probably will discuss is their recent stepping up of military cooperation. China last month sent hundreds of its troops to take part in military exercises in Russia's Far East. This is a key concern of Xi Jinping, who has reportedly been made aware by Russia's misadventures in Ukraine how its own armed forces, modern and well-equipped though they are, lack any practical battlefield experience, while their potential adversaries, the United States, with its frequent engagement in conflicts abroad, has the most experienced forces in the world. So training with Russians who, for all the flaws in their recent strategic approaches, have nevertheless faced a lot of difficult reality on the battlefield, is one way at least he can start to improve that position. One thing that probably won't be discussed is that while China fights a massive COVID wave, Russia seems to have an epidemic of its own. We might call it sudden oligarch death syndrome. The mysterious symptoms include falling from a high window of a hotel or other building, having had a history of, at some point, criticising Putin or the war in Ukraine. The latest was Pavel Antov, a politician and founder of a meat production company. He was in India to celebrate his 66th birthday and apparently fell from a third-floor window. This after another member of the same group was found dead a couple of days earlier. What could be causing it? Well, the Indian authorities, who have been keeping assiduously close to Russia without overtly picking sides, said, well, it was probably suicide. No connection at all then to the fact that he'd called Russia's missile attacks on Ukraine terrorism in social media posts earlier this year until abruptly U-turning. His death brings the number to 21 during the course of 2022, around about 2 per month, many of whom have specifically fallen out of a window at great height. Some have noted that the continued use of the exact same method, very similar to how the Russian state uses its very distinctive poison Novichok to dispose of enemies abroad. It's a poison that's associated with them, and they use it anyway, all the while denying they had anything to do with it, almost with a smirk as they did so. Basically, you only do things that way when you're communicating to the world, and particularly to those who might fear they will become future targets, that you don't care who knows. You are acting with impunity because you can. Now, of course, Russian authorities have insisted that there is absolutely no foul play here. All of these oligarchs have just been hit by depression, one of life's little coincidences. And I guess they must be right, because otherwise you would have to conclude that they were lying liars who lie a lot, which certainly can't be the case. Since it's the post-Christmas holiday season, hard news is thin on the ground this week, at least the sort that I like to talk about, so while I wouldn't normally cover this next item, it is a perfect illustration of why you shouldn't believe stories reported in the mainstream media, especially when, for one side at least, they're just too good to be true. This story involves controversial manosphere guy Andrew Tate and the young adult as she now is, Greta Thunberg. The popular story, as reported and as repeated, goes like this. Tate, who was recently allowed back onto Twitter by Elon Musk's amnesty, gratuitously tweeted a taunt aimed at Thunberg. As far as I can tell, this was the first communication between them. I have 33 cars. My Bugatti has a W16 8-litre quad turbo. My 2 Ferrari 812 Competizioni have 8.5-litre V12s. This is just the start. Please provide your email address so I can send a complete list of my car collection and their respective enormous emissions. A tweet worthy of a roll of the eyes and little more, you'd think. A guy who clearly uses a certain persona to create a public name for himself. Well, Thunberg responded, and she responded with a tweet saying, yes, please do enlighten me. Email me at smalldickenergy@getalife.com. Because this is the world we live in, this was taken as the wittiest comeback ever and got viral spread amongst all the people who claimed that they were leaving Twitter but still seemed to be there. At 3.2 million likes, it was rated as one of the 10 most liked tweets of all time, apparently. Make of that what you will. He then responded with a video response in which could be seen the empty pizza boxes of a local company in Romania, and since Tate was wanted by the authorities there for alleged human trafficking and rape and forming an organised crime group, that led the Romanian cops straight to him. He was detained, and Thunberg capped it all off with the tweet, "This is what happens when you don't recycle your pizza boxes," which indeed was very witty, and it made for the perfect story for those who wanted to believe it. The ultimate comeuppance, self-inflicted harm by someone who, let's face it, was being an obnoxious Burke. You don't have to be a Thunberg fan to kind of get the poetical irony of it all. Except, of course, it isn't true. Nothing in the original story in the Romanian media suggested that it was the video response to Thunberg with the pizza boxes that led the police to Tate's home in Romania. They'd already raided his home there once before, while he and his brother were out of the country. Since they were out of the country a lot, they were biding their time, waiting for their return. They picked up on a number of sources of information, including social media, to tip them off that they were back. But rather than a rando video with him with a pizza box, they probably went by the tweet where he posted saying that he was in Romania, along with all those other sources of evidence. Nothing in the original reporting suggested otherwise. The claims for a linkage were, as so often is the case, traceable back to an unsourced tweet that was then amplified by people who wanted to believe it. It was just too good a story for some to want to ask too many questions, including journalists who were supposed to ask questions, like the UK's Independent, which covered the story in celebratory if inaccurate detail, and the Metro, likewise, and the Daily Star, and so on. By the way, this story was also the vehicle whereby I found out that I was on a blacklist, which is very exciting. The person who posted the tweet alleging the link, it turns out, was blocking me on Twitter, which was a surprise because not aware that we'd ever crossed paths at all. Then I found out that there's a number of really big lists of accounts to block that people sign up to. The most expansive one is one aimed at alleged transphobes, which has hundreds of thousands of accounts on it, and it said that you can end up included on that list if you so much as follow J.K. Rowling. Well, I've exchanged friendly tweets with Abigail Schreier before now, so I thought it quite likely, and I checked, and sure enough, I am on that blacklist. So a whole bunch of people who just want anyone who might think even slightly differently to them on that topic cleared out of sight. Those people are invisible to me, apparently, and vice versa. That's a choice they make, so it goes. Done those New Year's resolutions yet? Well, here's a thought from someone who makes a habit out of taking such things seriously and actually keeping resolutions, which you can decide is impressive or insane, both are arguable. Make this the year when you add not just a New Year resolution, but a new type of resolution. Traditional resolutions come in two flavours: the things you know you should stop doing and the things you wish you would start doing. Stop eating donuts or smoking or whatever it might be. Start doing regular exercise or writing that novel you know you have inside you, or whatever it may be. There's another one that people never think of that I've seen. Make a resolution about how you will respond to the next crisis. Not the things you'll do tomorrow when it's just a normal day, the things you'll do when all of a sudden you find that it's not a normal day at all. We get defined by how we respond to a crisis or to difficult times. We say that people of strong character are those who cope in a crisis. People of weak character go to pieces, do the wrong thing. But often the difference between the two is simply one of being prepared. What are the predictable crises that will come to you or your family at some point, and maybe in 2023? Your list will be specific to your situation, but most people could put on the list things like a major illness that prevents them from working, witnessing someone being attacked in the street and having to make a split-second decision whether to get involved, what to do if your power fails for an extended time, you could draw up a list. These are not terrible things that you simply have to put out of your mind and hope that they never happen. They happen all the time. They're part of life. So make a resolution to list them down and note how you would be best prepared when that thing happens. Maybe that'll involve doing some research to learn what's the best way to respond. And it may involve some degree of commitment to ongoing preparation, adding certain skills and keeping them fresh. So if and when it does, you are prepared, you know what to do, you can just act in the moment. And then you'll be able to look back afterwards and know that you responded as your best self. And that made a difference to the outcome, probably. And even if it didn't, because sometimes it's not within our gift, you know that you were as well prepared as you could have been, which can save you a ton of regret. While other types of New Year's resolutions might make you fitter or thinner, or maybe just disappointed because you couldn't keep it going past the end of January, or maybe even the middle of January, this resolution will make you more resilient, changing your entire mindset on life to anticipate changing circumstances, not being a victim to them. That one shift in mindset could change what kind of a year 2023 turns out to be. Because when most people wish for a good year, what they're hoping for is a year where nothing bad happens. And, hopefully some good things happen as well. Well, I wish you a good 2023, by which I mean a year in which you are strong and your best self to survive and thrive regardless of what gets thrown at you. All right, my heartfelt thanks to all who responded to the video I released this week talking about why this channel isn't growing. It was intended to share with you what I'd learned about how the algorithm really works and what options I have to consider in working out how to move things forward. I wasn't prepared for the wave of supportive comment and encouragement that it was going to provoke. And it means a lot to know that what I do here is highly valued by at least some of you. And I'd already said that I wasn't giving up trying to crack this in 2023, but you gave me all the more reason. There was even a small influx of new Patreon supporters, which I'm always grateful to see, and people upping their support, existing supporters. And yes, that is the segue for me thanking that important group who have been there throughout 2022 and who have made this channel possible. I could not spend the time that I do making these videos and committing to making videos throughout 2023 without them. If you would like to add your support for the independent, fact-focused and non-ideological content that I aim to produce here, please head on over to patreon.com/Mallen Baker. It is always appreciated. Either way, have a great new year, have a great week. My name's Mallen Baker, this is the Mallen Baker Show. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, please share with anyone else you think would also enjoy it. Word of mouth is really important to us. And if you've not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? As the saying goes, that subscribe button won't smash itself.